Ahoy, it's your boy. Good to be in touch again. Today is Sunday, August 27th. It's about 7:10 p.m. Yeah, a lot of big changes actually. I just had first couple of days of school this semester, and I got to tell you, this semester my schedule is shit. I got like one class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. One of those days you can throw in like an extra hour of discussion for another class, but it's not a lot, which is great on those days. However, on Tuesday and Thursday, I basically have class from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And it's only 3 classes, although one of those days there's an additional discussion group. And it's not like I'm in class the whole time. I actually have like a 2-hour break between my first and second class, and then I have another couple hours between my second and third class. And while that sounds awesome, that's actually a nightmare because I don't know what it is, but I had this every semester, which is I look at that time and I go, that's awesome. I'm going to stay on campus. I'm going to go to the library and I'm going to do homework. And although I do that, inevitably, that time is very difficult for me because I'll go to the library and I'll start doing reading, and I just fight wanting to sleep. I don't know what it is, but I get in that library, I settle in somewhere, and I sit down, and inevitably I'm doing some type of reading assignment because as a comparative literature major, but even as my other major is East Asian religion, thought, and culture, the amount of reading I have to do is just insane, and I'm just kind of I have to do these long, tedious readings, and inevitably I usually take like a 15-minute nap in my seat. But this last Thursday, I mean, it was awful. And the worst part is it's fine in the beginning of the semester because it's new, it's what you're doing, you're adapting to your schedule. But as the semester wears on, it gets a little dangerous because you get those 2-hour breaks. And if you have a day that comes around where you just don't have it in you, it's very easy to talk yourself into going home. And, sometimes that's not a huge deal because depending on the lecturer or the teacher, it could be that, although of course everyone wants you to attend lecture, it may not be part of your grade. But inevitably, because I'm cursed or I did something wrong in a past life, attendance is very important for all of my classes this semester. So in one sense, that's good because now I'm accountable and I'll have to be in class. But it just means it's a more fertile ground for my resentment as I'm sitting there. Every fiber of my being is telling me to just get back on my bike and head home and be done with the day. And yet I have to sort of kill 2 hours in the library, falling asleep over, some long-winded academic article about inscriptions in ceremonial vessels from the Tang Dynasty in China or something like that. So but that's okay. I think also some of my I was going to say my ire, I don't know, but I also have a little bit of senioritis. This is my last semester. I'm very eager to finish, and I think it's like anything else. When you see that finish line in sight, it's just very easy to, I don't know, just want to be done with the whole thing. So it's funny. I was actually just sitting here thinking my belly's full of pizza, and I actually feel very just kind of fat right now. As I was sitting down, I was thinking, I think in another, in the first iteration of these recordings, at some point in that cycle, I mean, we were connecting for about 2.5 years or something like that, but I was doing a lot of running, which I've since not done at all. So, I was just thinking like, gosh, I just feel, as I get older, it's just harder to keep your weight down. And, even though I had like 2 slices of pizza at work today, and we can talk more about that. It just sits in you, and you already feel it like being absorbed into your body. You don't burn things off the way that you used to when you were younger. I was thinking when I was running a lot, or I'd run a couple half marathons and I run some longer events and stuff like that. I do remember if you're running and you have like another usually for these events, they have the mile markers posted. When you see the last mile or 2 miles or something, you just kind of go into overdrive. And no matter how tired you are, there's sort of this switch gets flipped where, at least for me, I always wanted to like leave everything on the course. You know, whether I was running a half marathon, or actually the worst example for me was when I did this thing called Ragnar Relay, which I think is like a 100-mile relay race that you do with a team of, I think, 6 people, and everybody gets 3 legs of the race, and you run it over a 48-hour period continuously. So while one person is running, the other people just jump in a van and drive ahead. And then when that person catches up, somebody else jumps out and starts running. And you do this continuously for 48 hours. So inevitably, you, or at least I did anyway, I had like my first leg was like, I think in the afternoon, and then I ended up running at like 1 or 2 in the morning. And then, you sleep for a couple hours, and then you get up, and I ran at like 10 a.m. for like the last like 5 miles of my part or whatever. But it's like I would see people, and they're at like the last mile before the finish line, and they're walking. And I guess at the end of the day, if you have to walk, if you absolutely have to walk, you have to walk. What else are you going to do? But my sense was it was just kind of, people were just kind of done or kind of tapped out. For me, it was always like, I don't need it anymore. Like, even if I'm tired, I can still reach down deep and just, I don't know, find the energy I need. One, to just finish strong. But also, it's that other thing, and maybe it's just my vanity or whatever it is. I'm like, you're about to run to the finish line where everybody's waiting. Do you really want you really want people to see you sauntering up to the finish line? Or, I mean, the strategy should have been, you should have walked the last 4 or 5 miles and just run at the very end and look like you were finishing strong. You know what I mean? So it seemed like there was a tactical error there. But the point is yeah, maybe I'm just trying to draw a distinction between when I was running and I'm seeing the finish line. It was very easy to sort of put the pedal to the metal. And yet, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of stutter stepping into this last semester at school. But yeah, I sort of gestured toward work. Yeah, I said I ate pizza at work, and you're thinking, well, why'd you do that? In my work, we have volunteers. A big part of my job is I train our volunteers. And we do like 4 trainings a year. And I've been gone for the last 2 months, obviously. But as I'm coming back, we're finishing up a training cycle. And so we, quote, graduated our volunteers today. And we always throw a pizza party for them. And yeah, so that's nice. Although I think the big change, and maybe I talked about this, maybe I didn't talk about this, I'm not sure. But I've been in my current job for about 6 years. And I originally started off as a volunteer there. And I actually announced to my work last week that I basically gave them my notice that I'm going to be there for 2 more weeks, and then I'm going to quit. So, yeah, basically just to give me a chance to focus on my studies, and I'm taking a pretty heavy course load this semester. In addition to that, I have to write my honors thesis, which I ostensibly have been working on for 2 semesters, or at least I was supposed to start last semester. And although I looked at it and kind of gathered some research materials, I haven't looked at or thought about it in many months. So I admit that although I have to pick that up here pretty soon, I'm also thinking, I just don't know how that's going to work out. So, yeah. So I put in my 2 weeks. So, yeah, it definitely feels like the end of an era for me. But I also have to admit, as important as my work was to me, and frankly, I'm not sure if I've talked about it at length or if I should, but I'll just say that I worked for the county crisis line. I started off as a volunteer there myself. I spent most of my time as a shift supervisor and crisis counselor on the lines with our callers and supervising our volunteers. And during that time, I was doing some training where I would teach classes for the volunteer cohorts that would come in. And over time, I just took on more of that training responsibility and really, really enjoyed it. Eventually, I kind of was given I basically transitioned away from focusing on being on the lines with our callers to interviewing volunteers, training volunteers, designing and facilitating training and that sort of stuff. And although that's been great, And in some ways made me think about what maybe teaching or something like that would be something that I could do and enjoy. I've also kind of known for the last couple of years that I've pretty much gotten everything I'm going to get out of this job. It's been very important for my personal and professional development, but it's just become increasingly clear that, I've kind of gotten everything I'm going to get out of it. So yeah, I guess in one part I feel a little sad, or maybe actually I'm happy to be leaving because I think it will. One, I just won't go as crazy as I have been going most semesters. I mean, I remember right before I left for Taiwan, I was just, it's bad for my health. I just looked awful. I wasn't sleeping well. I was stressed. And at the end of the day, that's kind of, like something I tell myself all the time when things get hard is I just say, well, it's called work for a reason. It's just hard. And it's not like, I don't know. I guess it's not hard like some jobs are hard. It's not like I'm doing anything, especially difficult. Meaning there's millions of people in history who have been full-time students and worked full-time. So I kind of berate myself or tell myself that I shouldn't adopt quite the martyr mentality that I might sometimes. This is just a part of life, and it's something that other people have done, and it's something that you can do as well. But if I'm being honest, at the same time, it was just really wreaking havoc on my physical health, on my mental health in some ways. And I admit, I don't want to go into details because it seems like, I don't know, it's not really my place to, I can air my own dirty laundry, or, I can say and even regret things that I say about myself on this record, and I can sort of live with that, but it's, it's not really my place to sort of air other people's dirty laundry or something like that. So I won't go into details about my work, but it's just been, kind of frustrating for me for a long time. There just haven't been as many opportunities for advancement as I would have liked, and, just different philosophies on operational things or systems level thinking, where we just kind of, our perspectives were divergent. And so, yeah, again, I felt I've been sort of spinning my wheels, or that it's more of a job of convenience than anything else, which is not nothing, but, that's not really going to be sustainable in the long run, I think. So yeah, I admit I sort of talked about it in therapy, and, it's funny, I sort of go about my life and I'm always looking for permission to do the things that I know I want to do. For example, when I first broached this topic in therapy a couple weeks ago, it was all about, well, I need to find out if I'll be returning to Taiwan. And I was sort of framing the conversation in terms of logistics. But as I was talking about it in our last session, I was, some things had happened that really kind of solidified that, it's really going to be a greater challenge than I anticipated continuing to stay in this position. The frustrations that were kind of tolerable previously, I think just after a long break of being in Taiwan and maybe having a better sense of the direction I'm headed and how I'd like to be spending my time, returning to those frustrations just didn't feel as sustainable or manageable. And, my therapist was like, well, it sounds like you don't want to work there regardless of what the future holds, whether or not you go back to Taiwan. It just sounds like you don't want to be there. And if you don't have to financially, why would you? And so, yeah, it was just clarifying for me, because I feel like there's so many things in my life that if it were just up to me, or if I lived in a vacuum, I know exactly what I want to do. But I always struggle with making that decision or just doing the thing that I want to do, because I always feel like I have to justify it to somebody else. I mean, on a macro level, I don't really know what I want to do with my future practically. Although I'm also holding space for, I remember, I said at the end of our last record here that, I don't want to forget, I know I have this looming creative project, which at the end of the day is really how I want to spend my time. But the thing that makes it feel impossible is, how do I justify that to other people? I'm knocking on the door of 40. I'm not established in a professional career. I'm actually just finishing my undergrad. And it's like I feel this need, maybe also as someone who's dating too, who not infrequently has to sit across from strangers, and kind of present themselves to them as a viable romantic option. I have to basically show people where I'm at in my life, and let myself be evaluated. It can feel uncomfortable sometimes if I'm sitting across from someone who has different values from me or is expecting, maybe they just don't like where I'm at in my life. We're at very different places, if they're well established in their career. I mean, especially at 40, you have people who like have kids or have already burned through one marriage, and here I am like just graduating college. And, I guess I know on one level that my story is more complicated than that. But on first hearing, it's very easy for someone to just assume I've been sort of sitting on my hands, twiddling my thumbs for the last 15 years or so. But yeah, where am I going with that? I guess I'm saying, whether it's quitting my job or returning to Taiwan, yeah, I guess I can have a lot of clarity about what I want to do, or whatever the next step in my life should be for me to make me happy. But it's very difficult for me to make that decision because I feel the need to justify it. How am I going to justify that decision to other people? On a large scope, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. I don't really know. Like, I guess returning to school and starting on this whole trajectory, I really thought that there was going to be a moment where I stumbled across something where there was just like a spark or a light bulb went off, or I would find, not music or something else that really, my dad described it one time. He worked in sort of finance, more or less. But he said, when he does that, when he looks at the stock market, for him, like time just like disappears. It's the thing he does where he just gets lost in it. And it's the type of thing that he can spend an entire day doing, and it doesn't feel like work. Not that it doesn't have its own challenges or disappointments or things like that, but it's the type of thing that he can really give himself and his time to, and it doesn't feel like a loss. It's something that he actually really enjoys doing. And if you can make money doing that, that's great. For me, it has been and probably continues to be creative stuff. And that's very hard to leverage in terms of like making money. But the point is that returning to school, I really hoped that I would find something that kind of lit me up in the same way, whether it was being a teacher or, whatever it is. And, that just hasn't happened. And so I'm really at a point where I'm kind of reconciling myself to the idea that although I would like to be a man of the world in a traditional sense, where I have a job that I sort of love and I can advance in a kind of typical career and be fulfilled by that, at the end of the day, I'm an artist, and I realize that's multidimensional, but I'm a creative type, and I'm just going to have to find a job, and it's not going to be a job that fulfills me in the same way that art or creativity does, but it's going to have to be the best of what's around given the available information. And I still don't know what that is. It could be teaching. It could be something tangential to Chinese, or maybe it's teaching English in Taiwan or something like that. But it's not going to be the kind of spirit-fulfilling work that I was hoping to find. And so for now, I guess I'm trying to contrast it with what I do know, which is I'm going to graduate this semester, and really the only thing I want for myself right now is to get back to Taiwan. I've applied to a couple language programs that start at various times in the winter and the spring, either February or March, and I would be there for 3 months. And, that's not a lifelong plan, but when I think about what I actually want for the immediate future, that's really the only thing that comes to mind. And if there was some type of geopolitical event where that was not possible, I would be genuinely disappointed. But there's really nothing else in my life that feels as clear as that. I guess actually, returning to the topic of work, I think my therapist was reflecting, it actually sounds like you don't want your job. So for example, although it's a negative expression, it's not a want, it's a not want, but I know in my heart I don't want to work at my job anymore. I know that very clearly. So, but again, I feel a lot of external pressures. I guess for me, although I know what I want sometimes, it sort of pales in comparison to what I think I should be doing. And I have to, and the challenge for me is thinking about where does that should come from. So, for example, although I know I don't want to work at my job, and at the end of the day, financially, I don't have to, I have the resources to not work for a time if that's what I choose to do. But for some reason, I have this operating idea in my mind that I have to, that I should be a full-time student and be going and working full-time. I should be working and going to school full-time. And part of it I feel is like a penance. Like because I'm 38, because I've, put off this chapter of my life, this or graduating college or something like that, that I need to make it harder for myself. I was sort of laughing with a friend, honestly. I was saying, I had this thought actually as I was walking around campus the other day, which is, this is not boasting, this is just true, which is since returning to school, I've been an exceptional student. Even while I've been working, I've gotten straight A's except for one B plus that I got in my fourth semester of Mandarin. But I've gotten straight A's, honors list, dean's list. I was awarded the CLS scholarship to study Mandarin in Taiwan. I'll be applying for a Fulbright scholarship to maybe go to graduate school in Taiwan, which I think I'm very competitive for. I got an invitation to Phi Beta Kappa, which I am now a member of, which you can Google. First of all, I don't really care what Phi Beta Kappa is, but it's the type of thing that looks good on a resume. And but at the same time, I'm also thinking you're an adult. There's a part of me that treats it like, well, it's like if you were playing a basketball with a bunch of elementary schoolers, you should be killing it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, although I'm doing well in college and that's great, that's not nothing. At the end of the day, I feel like I'm on a what do they call it? Like an obstacle course that's designed for people who are at least 18 and probably at most in their early 20s, for the most part. Right? So I feel like I should be killing it. It's very easy for me to discount those accomplishments because I say that's what you should be doing, especially as an adult. And if you're choosing to be in college in this chapter of your life, you should be working full time as well, like just for your own dignity, right? As I'm sort of exiting my job, I feel like I'm also walking into this chapter of my life where I'm just a college student. And that feels a little infantile or juvenile, as if it's somehow not enough for someone at my age to just be going to school. And so, yeah, it's weird because on the one hand, it's like there should be something, there should be something. I guess I look at, on the one hand, from like a psycho-spiritual or personal development perspective, I feel like knowing what you want and giving yourself permission to do the thing that you want to do, regardless of what other people think about it. I mean, even as I'm saying this, I'm not pretending that there, maybe even you or other people listening to this agree with everything I'm saying, which is, yeah, you should be going to school full-time and you should be a full-time student and you should be getting straight A's. And to be doing less than that, especially at your age, is embarrassing. That could be people listening to this. It could be the people I sit across from on dates. But the point is that even knowing that's real, if I search inside myself and realize that that's not the type of thing that's dictating my life or that's not going to make me happy, or maybe even worse, bending myself to that or making that the rubric that I use to make important decisions in my life is actually going to make me miserable, like that's actually not very evolved. That's just kind of self-defeating. And in a way, it's kind of immature, to just kind of defer or look to the world to tell you what you should be doing. In a way, the more mature thing, the more evolved thing, even if it's confusing to other people, is to do the thing that is going to make you happy. That's winning. For example, I just watched this movie, The Big Short, which is not a great movie, but it's on Netflix right now. And it's so weird. It's one of these things where when I went into work today and we had our sort of get together with the volunteers who are graduating, And my supervisor said, "Oh, I just watched The Big Short." And I said, "You're fucking shitting me. I literally finished that this morning before I came here." And it just reminded me that, although especially online, whether it's Netflix or what other streaming services we use, we think we're kind of watching our own thing, but we're all kind of being shown the same content at the same time. Even these old movies like The Big Short, which I think came out in like 2015. I don't know. It just feels like we're all picking from the same buffet. And so, anyway, there was something invalidating about that as well. I was sort of watching this movie, um, um, and yeah, it was just weird that my supervisor had sort of watched the same thing or had been served up the same content. It felt like I don't know. I think my algorithm knows me or something, but it doesn't. It's just feeding me the same shit it's feeding everybody else. But the point is that there's I don't pretend to really understand the whole housing crisis or the financial stuff that happened in 2007, even though I lived through it. But one of the takeaways is basically one of the reasons this financial crisis was so cataclysmic was that you just had a kind of collective delusion, and everybody was kind of playing the same game because nobody was really looking into things. Everybody was just kind of getting along the same way everybody else was, and there's something like that in life sometimes where we all just try to get along and do the thing that everybody else seems to be doing. And although it's not making us happy, if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, if this is the should, right, the should that's sort of propelling or informing my decisions, we kind of blame ourselves for it not making us happy, which is what I live with. It's not like I think, oh, this is not making me happy, I guess I want something else. It's like, oh, this isn't making me happy, I guess there's something wrong with me, is really how I feel about it most times. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to say I feel like when I make these decisions, like despite what other people might think about this, I know work is not making me happy. And I need to trust my own judgment about that. And especially since I don't have to work, I'm just going to give myself permission to quit that job and see how that works for me. That is that there's a you may scoff and laugh at this, but believe it or not, for me, there's a type of courage in that. When I make those types of decisions, I feel like, I feel like I'm taking a risk. I'm kind of betting on myself in a way that I don't normally do. And, that's a very uncomfortable thing for me to do. But I'm trying to do more of it. And I think just trying to get back to where I was talking about before, like I don't really know what I want to do long term. And so I feel that pressure. I have these sort of imaginary voices or phantoms that I just sort of imagine circling around me and putting this sort of invisible pressure on me. At the end of the day, there's no one banging down my door or interrogating me or asking me these types of questions, but I put this pressure on myself, or I imagine that these types of people exist. Even though I don't know what I want to do long term, I know that I want to get back to Taiwan. I know I want to go back in the winter and spring and just continue my language study and trust that process and see what it presents to me. And that's all I know. I know I don't want to work at my job. I know I want to graduate. I want to finish strong, so I'll work hard at that. And after that, I'd like to go to Taiwan for another 3 months. And that's about it. And I wish I knew more than that. I mean, I guess because at the same time, very practically, I have to be applying for grad school. If I want to go to grad school at all, now I need to be applying for it. I mentioned a Fulbright scholarship, which I'm applying for. At the end of the day, I'm not convinced that that's what I want, but if I want to be in the running for it at all, I need to complete the application by October. And shortly after that, Taiwanese schools are not on the same schedule as U.S. schools, but it's like if you want to go to grad school in Taiwan, you need to begin applying, sort of towards the end of the semester. So those are things that I'm going to be doing anyway. I really think my time returning in the spring and the winter for 3 months will actually help me decide if that's actually what I want to be doing. Just because although I loved my 2 months there, and I may love the next 3 months that I spend there, I think living in Taiwan is very different from visiting Taiwan. For example, I have a friend who left for Taiwan just a couple days ago, actually, and they're going to be there for 9 months. And while I'm very excited for them, I'm also kind of going to use them as a case study, to see what, spending more time there feels like. I mean, I do have one friend. I was, my supervisor was asking me, "Oh, did you make friends or do you stay in touch with people?" And just last night, I have two friends that Taiwanese people use an app called Line. I'm sorry if you're already well familiar with it, and I'm talking to you like I'm telling you something new. But in Taiwan, they use an app called Line to connect. They send text messages and all that sort of stuff through that versus through just straight up text messages on your iPhone or something like that. So I message with these people all the time, but we also check in. We have checked in every week since I've been back through a long form video conversation. And so last night I messaged both of them for about an hour and a half each. And one of them is actually from Vietnam, and she's been living in Taiwan for I think a couple years now. Is also learning Mandarin and also is employed by a Taiwanese company. But she's although she originally loved Taiwan and enjoyed visiting and thought moving there and working in Taiwan would be the bee's knees, it actually hasn't worked out for her the way that she wanted. And it could be the job that she's in is just not fulfilling. But I guess I'm just trying to acknowledge that, that's kind of, it's just something to consider, that visiting is very different than living there. But the one thing I told them, and I'm sort of trying to tell myself as well, as I'm sort of saying, well, I know that I want to return and I want to explore more, and my time there in the spring or the winter is going to be a little bit of a reconnaissance mission. A lot of times you just don't know until you do something. How could you? Until you spend time in a foreign country, a significant amount of time, how could one know whether or not they're going to be happy there? But I think I do this thing where I imagine, oh, if I were to go to grad school in Taiwan and after a year I realized I was miserable, it would be very easy for me to just sort of crucify myself and assume that I had made some catastrophic error that I should have foreseen from the very beginning. I treat relationships this way too, as well, or when I think about relationships. At the first iteration of this audio record, this personal journal that you're listening to, when I took a break of it, I ended a 5-year relationship. And I'm not saying that I really had these feelings at the end of that, but, that was the longest relationship I had been in. And the fact that that one didn't kind of go the distance, and by that I mean like end in marriage or something like that, I think it's easy to assume that it somehow wasn't a success ultimately. I'm not saying I really see it that way. But when I look ahead and I think about what I want from dating now, most people my age, if they get in a serious relationship, they definitely want to get married. But anyway, I feel like I'm talking myself in circles. But the point I'm really trying to make is, to get to, is what I told my friend, which is, just because you move to Taiwan and you work at a company and you're not happy, it doesn't mean that it was a mistake to go there. That was still a formative experience. You couldn't have known what living in Taiwan and working in Taiwan would have felt like until you went there. So, you don't need to beat yourself up for it not turning out the way that you wanted it to, that you wanted things to turn out. That's the way life works. And so sometimes I guess I don't know if it's smart or, I tell myself it's short-sighted, but maybe it's smart to just make make decisions based on the information you have now. Don't forecast too far into the future, and just take it one step at a time and see where things go. Going back to Taiwan, which is what I want to do, and it's what I can do, and it's what I will do. Just the few months I spend there, who knows what that experience will bring. It may clarify a lot for me. It may let me know that I definitely don't want to be there for grad school, and whether or not I get accepted. I mean, the good thing about applying to things is you don't have to go. You just put your hat in. What do you call it? You put your hat in the game. You put your hat in the ring. I don't know. You put your name in the hat. Maybe that's one way to think about it. You pull your name in the hat, and if they draw it, you can then decide if it's something that you actually want to do. Although I will say, the one way in which grad school applications are different is I require references. And so I do feel a little bad that I know, like for Fulbright especially, I will kind of need the support or the endorsement of, not a few people. I need to find someone to evaluate my language skills. I need 3 letters of recommendation. And those letters of recommendation, they can't just be generic endorsements of character or academic progress. They actually have to speak to my ability to accomplish what I'm saying I'm setting out to accomplish in my graduate program. So they kind of have to be tailor-made for that program. And that's a big ask. So I guess at this point I'm waffling a little bit because I do feel ambivalent if that's something that I want to do or not. And I guess I feel bad about, asking people to devote their own time for me to be considered for something that I'm actually kind of on the fence about. So, even talking about it makes me a little whatever. Yeah, speaking of giving yourself permission to do things, this is very forced, but I'm trying to remind myself. I remember at the end of our, last installment of whatever this is, I was talking about the Christopher Nolan film Memento and not forgetting. And, yeah, I guess I'm trying to remind myself. I haven't listened back to it, but I think the last time that we connected, I probably made a kind of hopeful or, maybe even prayerful, if that's not too heavy-handed a word, a prayerful statement about, hey, I hope by the time we reconnect or you hear from me, I've made meaningful progress on this creative project finally, or I've finally picked it up in earnest. And I haven't done that. And, I don't have a lot to say about it other than the same thing over and over again. But as I come to this, I guess I just want to just keep bringing it up and reminding myself that it's something to think about meaningfully. And, I don't know. The minute I start talking about it, I sort of regret it. But, yeah, maybe that's enough. I just want to acknowledge it and say that I haven't forgotten about it. And it's something I need to continue thinking about. And who knows? I mean, it could be that once I graduate, even if I do go to grad school, I'll have an entire semester and a summer to myself for the most part. I mean, even if I do go to Taiwan for my language study, there's many hours in the day. There's still plenty of time to do creative things if that's what I want to do. And who knows? Maybe, kind of writing in exile or writing, in a place far removed from my routine is just the thing I need. Because I admit, I said when I came back, the last thing I wanted is to fall into my routine. And I have to be honest with you. I sort of fell back into that immediately. The minute I start classes again, I feel like I'm back in the same part of my life, and it's like this whole experience in Taiwan didn't happen. And, I think part of, quitting my job is just trying to, do something drastic to make sure that something about these next few months or this last semester is not like the others. And it doesn't mean that I take on any added responsibilities or that I work exponentially harder. In a way, maybe it's like just taking a risk to actually work less hard in some ways, to be healthier. It's not like maybe I don't use this time to write the next great American novel or anything, but I use that time to like go to bed at a reasonable hour or maybe exercise more, or I don't know, read a book for fun. Although, of course, for me, I tell myself, like, now I have all this added time. Like, what can I fill it with to make myself feel productive? I think, well, you're really going to have to, take responsibility for your language study. Last year, fall and spring, I had no modern Mandarin classes. I just had classical Chinese. And so when I went to Taiwan, I could get by, but, my language, I didn't have quite the language gains I should have had if I had continued my language study throughout the year, or if I had kept it up in a more meaningful way. I had language partners that I would connect with and we would talk a little bit, but that just kind of kept things from drying up completely. There was really no improvement there. And so I don't know. I think about this. I think I was sort of inching toward this topic at the beginning of our talk here, and I sort of lost the plot a little bit. But I did have an interesting moment in therapy as well, which was sort of tangentially related to my therapist saying, well, you know what you want to do, and there are things that I feel very clearly that I know I want to do. Like, yeah, I want to quit my job. And so therapy is great for validating those things. Doesn't mean that you follow through with those plans, but it can just clarify for you how you actually feel about things. I know I want to return to Taiwan, and so that's very validating, and so I will be doing that. But my therapist made this observation that felt a little strange to me, which is, as I was saying, when I returned to school, I really wanted to find the thing that I fell in love with, and that when I did at the time sort of slipped away. The type of way I would feel sometimes when I'm working on creative stuff, or when I was songwriting, or even editing video. And my therapist's like, well, you have. And I was like, well, what's that? And she's like, Chinese. And I was like, it's interesting that you say that, because I've actually had conversations with people recently, and maybe I've said it here as well. I actually don't feel like I'm in love with Chinese, the language. It's not, one, I don't think I'm that talented at it. It's been very hard for me. And actually, for most of my studying, and I think some of it's predicated on I had kind of a unique entry point into the language, I've not been great at it. I started studying, I had to sort of crash course my way into studying Mandarin, and took a year's worth of study over the summer. And when I started, with a regular course load in the fall, I was one of the worst people in the class consistently for the entire semester. Especially for how much work I put in. There were people who spoke or were not as good as me, but that was because they clearly weren't doing the work. I was doing the work and the homework, and I showed up to class every day, and I was just not very good. Most of the students were just better than me. And when I went to Middlebury, I originally went sort of temporarily, or given the exposure that I had, I should have been a third-year student. But it was very apparent very quickly that that was going to be too challenging for me, and I had to be demoted to a more elementary level. That was great for my language gains, but it was also, I had to reconcile myself to the fact that I guess given my exposure level, I wasn't where I should be. And that's actually one of the frustrating things about language, which is actually, even though I've been studying, in terms of calendar time, I've only been studying the language for 2 years, I've actually had 5 years worth of exposure. But language is one of these things that and it's frustrating to me that it is this way. I wish it wasn't this way, but it's proving itself to be unlike other disciplines or other things, which is, it's sort of your development is just sort of commensurate with the time that you put into it and the exposure that you have to it. And there are ways in which language is like that. But I also think that, even if you were to move to a foreign country and immerse yourself there, especially if you're an adult, as a child, maybe you will just absorb it, but you really have to marinate in language. Because it doesn't matter how many Chinese movies you watch, or if you just move to China or Taiwan and just immerse yourself in the language. Although I don't want to say that the input is nothing, if you're not understanding what's happening, you're not just going to magically learn the language. It's just going to wash over you. And, it's really, maybe it's a bit like, well, I was going to say working out or something like that, but actually, it's if you just sort of never leave the treadmill, of course you're going to lose weight a lot faster. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's like muscle. No matter how much you want to do, your muscles are going to give out. Your muscles are only as strong as they are. So it doesn't matter. You can't really will yourself to do more if your body's sort of giving out. And I'm not pretending this is a perfect analogy, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say, which is, although I've had X amount of input, it's just going to be impossible for my language ability to actually be there, because, my skills are only going to develop so fast. So although I'm doing very well for 2 years, and I've had some people let me know, they're very surprised. Oh, wow, you're only studying the language for 2 years. You're doing very well. There are also times where I feel well behind where I should be. And that's very frustrating. So anyway, I think I'm just trying to say that, when I imagine myself stumbling on the thing that I love to do, there would be, signs that I was sort of meant to do this, because I would just sort of feel the wind at my back, and I would feel myself taking off, and I would be excelling at it. And at the end of the day, that's just not true of my language study. I've always done very good. My grades have always been very good because I am a good student. But there's actually a sense in which, like, getting good grades and also just having a strong sense of where I'm actually at, that's clarified for me that being a good student and having a skill set are actually two different things. I took a semester of calculus and a semester of statistics and got an A in both, and I don't understand those topics. So yeah, I guess whether it's language or math, you can get an A in something and not understand it. And that may sound very strange, but I guess I'm just trying to say a good student is one thing and somebody who has a skill set is something else. So, I guess it's like even at my job, which was sort of like mental health related, I was working alongside, and I originally went to school to study psychology, maybe to become a therapist. But when I was alongside people who were in grad school for social work or to be clinicians or studying psychology, it was obvious to me that we were not the same type of people. I mean, they would talk about this stuff with a level of passion that I just knew in my heart I didn't possess. And I have to admit, I have a little bit of that feeling with Chinese too. Like, there's people who love the language and they just can't get enough of it, and they want to study vocab. And I mean, one of my roommates actually, when I was in Taiwan, was like, teaching themselves like a different type of, I think it's called like bopumufu or bopumufa. I'm gonna laugh if I hear this when I actually get my mind around what it is. But basically, it's if you're actually Chinese or Taiwanese, this is the way that you learn syllables and actually how to type Chinese characters versus what we use, which is called pinyin. But like, they were just teaching themselves that. And also, there's this, it's actually interesting. My supervisor texted me last night and asked me about this, which I didn't really understand. But sometimes people hear about the difference between simplified and traditional Chinese, and they think it's something to do with the spoken language. It's not. It's actually how the language is written. So if you speak Mandarin, Mandarin can be written in either traditional or simplified characters, and the traditional characters are just that. They're the original characters, but they're more complex. They're harder to write. They're more involved. And so to increase literacy, they created simplified characters, and that has become the standard version. But there are, so if in America, if you're learning Chinese, your courses probably default to using simplified characters because that's standard in China. However, there are places in the world like Hong Kong and Taiwan that still use traditional characters exclusively. So, although my inclination is to learn simplified and stick with that, some students have taken it upon themselves to learn traditional characters. And I don't really have that impulse. Although now I have to, I will have to sort of go back and kind of learn traditional characters again. But yeah, so all this to just say, like, I don't see that type of like above and beyond that I would like to see for myself, and something that if I'm going to be giving my time to it, that I would be putting in, if that makes sense. But yeah, so it was just strange for my therapist to say, well, you love Chinese. And I'd be like, that's interesting, because I don't feel like I love Chinese. And this is a very scary thing for me to say. But even in my last relationship, although I know intellectually that I loved this person, I never felt like I was falling in love with them. And while that sounds bad, hear me out. I want to contrast that with the sort of brief story that I told you last time about dating in Taiwan, which is I went on a date with someone that I had 2 dates with that were the best dates I've ever been on in my life. And I'm embarrassed to admit that I literally thought, oh, this is what it's like when you meet the person that you're going to marry. But because that didn't pan out, the real takeaway is that actually those firework types of experiences, although they're great and they're awesome when they happen, and I don't want to say that it wasn't awesome, they actually don't forecast a lot. They actually don't tell you a lot. They just kind of are what they are. For example, I love art and creativity. and I'm not going to make a living out of it. That's just the way it is. I tell myself when I find the thing I'm supposed to be doing, I'm going to excel at it. Right? We have a lot of successful people and entrepreneurs and whatever personalities telling us that, if you sort of unlock or you solve the Rubik's Cube of your life and yourself, when you find the thing that you're supposed to be doing, you're going to take off like a rocket ship. And while I want that, while I want that for myself and I want that for you, that just may not be the way the cracker crumbles. At the end of the day, life is really like these other things, which is the longest and most meaningful relationship of my life with someone who I did love, by the way. It was much more calmer and, it just sort of kept on going and it was always good and didn't stop. And I guess I'm trying to equate that with language study. My therapist says, you love Chinese. And I go, well, I guess. But maybe I'm a little miscalibrated and that I'm looking for the fireworks or I'm looking for the thing that, I feel like I'm going to take off like a rocket ship. But maybe this is just what life is. You find the thing that you do, and as long as it works, you just kind of keep going down that path. And as long as doors keep opening, you just kind of take the ride wherever it leads you. And I feel like that's kind of where I'm at, which is, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where this is leading me, but right now this is working out pretty well. Learning Chinese has given me a lot of experiences I just never would have had otherwise. And as long as that's working out for me, as long as I want to do that, let's see where that goes. Take the ride. Maybe it's a bit of a scenic route, Maybe it's these types of firework experiences are like the Learjet or something like that. And while that's very fun, maybe there's a way, it's because it's all fireworks, it's going to burn out very quickly. But sometimes the thing that really, the real vehicle, the greater vehicle of our lives, the thing that's really going to take us the distance is the one that's kind of slow and steady. That's the thing that's going to burn the longest. For example, it's interesting to me when I think about, the sort of first installment of this little personal journal was like 100 recordings, right? And that was like 2.5 years of doing that every week. And that just kind of went by like nothing. But when I look back on that repository of recordings, and if you're hearing this for the first time, you're certainly welcome to go back and hear those. It's just interesting what you can create if you just kind of commit to the process and just chip away at something. And it may not mean anything to anybody else, but it's like I heard Tony Robbins say this one thing, which, is a little platitudinous, but I think it happens to be true, which is people generally vastly overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year, but they vastly underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years. And I'm not pretending that this is the best thing ever. In fact, I don't know if this is disappointing to hear, but there's actually something about recording these little journals, which is, it's part an exercise in tolerating my own mediocrity. There's so much about, when I was writing songs and everything had to be perfect, and I would just sort of excoriate myself for, just trying to find the perfect word or perfect turn of phrase. Although that was good, and that led me to write some songs that I think are pretty good. At this point in my life, the idea of like sitting down and torturing myself that way just doesn't feel productive. And there's something about just, forcing myself, or maybe another way to look at it is giving myself permission to just sit down and record myself for an hour, and no matter what it is, just put it out. It's kind of showing myself, it's kind of returning to this place of when I was first writing songs as the plastic arts, and I was just kind of writing songs for myself and recording them and putting them out in the world. And, I still get emails from people who found that music. It wasn't a lot of people, but it was almost like that music found the people it was meant for. And those are the emails that I still get. I still get emails from people who say, oh, I found that record like 10 years ago, and it's just, I listen to it all the time. There's not a lot of people listening to this. I'm not reaching a lot of people with these recordings. And in fact, a lot of the people I'm reaching don't like it. But at least the feedback that I've gotten is that people don't like it. But, I know that some of you do, because I also get that feedback as well. So I think the point I'm trying to make is just trusting the process and first of all, committing to a process, and then just trusting it. Because even if the thing is not perfection in and of itself, it's the commitment to the process and letting it take you somewhere that is meaningful. In a way, I guess as I'm thinking about it now, maybe I will look up and decide that I actually love Chinese and I've just been deluding myself. Or there's, whatever self-destructive or whatever operating software I have in my brain is just trying to convince me otherwise. But, maybe I don't need to be in love with Chinese either. Maybe I'm sort of shooting at the wrong target, whether it's in relationships or in my major or in my work or in my life. If I'm just kind of sitting around waiting for the sign from God, the clear kind of the clouds depart and the light to sort of shine down on me and let me know that this is the way forward, you're probably going to miss a lot of opportunities, right? I mean, there's that sort of overused sort of example of, I don't know the story exactly, but it's like there's a flood and the person sees it as like a sign from God. And so as their neighbors evacuate, they say, come with us. And they say, no, I'm waiting for a sign from God. And then one of the rescue boats comes by and say, hey, hop on. And he says, no, I'm waiting for a sign from God. And then, of course, the guy dies and he goes to heaven. And God's like, hey, man, what's up with you? Why'd you do that? He says, I was waiting for a sign from you. And he was like, well, I sent the neighbors, I sent the boat, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. So I guess I'm just trying to say that sometimes, actually a better example would be in Labyrinth, where Jennifer Connelly's sort of running down the pathway and she's thinking, there's no turns, there's no doors, there's no anything. And the little worm says, there's a turn right in front of you. If we just go through our experience in our life, sort of waiting for these big overtures, we're actually going to miss all the turns and all the pathways that could have led us to the goal in the first place. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to trust the process. I'm going to take the ride. And as long as the way keeps opening up ahead of me, I'll just do that. So anyway, I'm already hearing this exit music play me off, which lets me know it's time to go. So yeah, I'm not sure if we can put a button on anything or if we're going to finish very gracefully here, but that's okay. There's future installments for us to sort of pick these things up and continue the conversation. So, well, we'll just have to wait for that then. So until then, I'll thank you again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And ciao for now.